She's traveled tens of thousands of miles, building a grassroots army across Texas. Millions of dollars raised, 56,000 donors. MJ Hagar for Senate, the leader Texas needs now more than ever. She holds the most promise for voters tired of the failing D.C. politics. Her military experience makes her the fighter Democrats need. A disruptor who can bring the fight, and a unifier who can reach across the aisle to get things done. And as MJ kicks into gear, Texas does too. Voter registration to 16.4 million despite the pandemic. And Texas is moving towards Democrats in the ratings.
She's ready to fight in Washington.
MJ Hagar has been the top fundraiser by a relatively healthy margin.
It is a different race. She has a good story, and I think it makes for a compelling race in 2020.
One of the top fundraisers in the state.
Wait. Hold on. You didn't think I was gonna let John off that easy, did you?
Then there's John Cornyn with an approval rating underwater.
He's been sort of an invisible man in Washington.
We see some favorability ratings that don't look so good. You're actually lower than President Trump, the governor, and Ted Cruz.
And the coronavirus?
Well, I think China is to blame because the culture where people eat bats and snakes and dogs and things like that.
The president has, I think, led well.
If you don't have any symptoms of the coronavirus, there's not a great reason to get tested. No one under the age of 20 has died of the coronavirus. That we still don't know whether children can get it and transmit it to others.
That's ridiculous.
Well, welcome to the general election, John. A brutal Texas re-election battle. Your toughest race yet in a changing Texas, and your last.
Are you concerned at all with all this talk about Texas turning blue?
Well, I sure am.
Saddle up, Texas, because the Senate race is in full swing.
Texas is the biggest battleground state.
And in 2020,
we have the opportunity to turn our state blue
up and down the ballot. We have the opportunity to expand access to affordable health care, finance our public schools, strengthen our economy, and take meaningful action on gun violence. There's so much more in the United States Senate.
We have the opportunity to pave the way towards a more sustainable future at the Texas Railroad Commission.
We have the opportunity
to elect judges
and the justices
who will restore fairness, equality,
and balance
in our courts.
We have the opportunity to shape the political future of Texas
and repair the broken systems that disenfranchise working families in our great state.
We have the opportunity to ensure that Texans in positions of power
embrace empathy,
open minds,
and swing open the doors of possibility.
By working together
and uniting behind our shared vision of a more inclusive world,
we will win back our state.
We will win because we have to.
We have to put an end to the hate, the lack of access, and the suffering.
We have to deliver on the fair shot that every Texan deserves.
Our cause,
our movement,
is about the restoration of justice and the expansion of opportunity.
None of this can be accomplished unless we work together.
In order to bring lasting change to Texas,
we must work alongside every down ballot candidate, every activist, and every Texas Democrat to continue building the largest democratic movement our state has ever seen.
We're asking you to be a part of this historic fight.
Together, we will create a Texas that we can all believe and thrive in.
Together, we will save Texas and in turn, save the entire country.
Join us.
Join us. John, we need to talk. It's just not working out.
Senator Cornyn, you misled us on the coronavirus.
You voted against funding for masks and ventilators.
And you're still trying to take away protections for people with pre-existing conditions.
It's not us, Senator.
It's you.
You won't fight for us.
And we found someone who will.
I'm MJ Hagar, and I approved this message because 18 years
Hello, everybody. Everybody out there. I always like to spend a little time just giving a little space to make sure that everybody is settling in. Hi, how is everybody? My name is Cristela Alonzo. I am a stand-up comedian. I'm an actor, but more importantly, I'm a Texan, born and raised. I was born in the Rio Grande Valley. I live in Los Angeles, but Texas is always in my heart, and I like to represent where I can. Thank you guys for joining the Latinos Votar event. I am a first-generation Mexican-American that does not take their vote lightly. I am from a mixed status family. My mother and my oldest brother were undocumented for years. My brother, it took over 30 years for him to become a naturalized citizen, which he finally did in 2016. And that is why I'm so interested and so active in trying to get people to vote, especially the Latino community, la comunidad latina. We need to be reminded that our vote matters so much. And I know that it's easy for some of us, there's so many of us, to feel like maybe one vote doesn't matter. But let me tell you, I'm here to tell you it does, especially in a state like Texas. In the past couple of weeks, we have seen people in positions trying to make it very hard for people to vote. And I always remind people, when you think that your vote, that your one vote doesn't count, you should look at what they're doing to make it so hard for you not to vote. That's a reminder of how scared they are of you, of how scared they are of your voice. You're capable of so much. Y este es un momento, me da un gran placer estar aquí con ustedes todos, porque este es el momento muy importante para la comunidad latina. Ahorita vamos a ir a votar, tenemos las boletas de votaciones. De vez en cuando hay muchos candidatos, muchos propósitos que no sabemos, que no entendemos. Pero ¿saben qué? I want you to know this isn't the time to be scared about not knowing certain sides, certain anything. Just make sure you go and vote. Vote as good as you can. My mentor, Dolores Huerta, always says, one of the problems with voting is that so many of us treat it like it's an exam. And if we make the wrong decisions, we fail the exam. It's not true. That test is just a representation of your voice and what we want to do. I'm so proud to be here on such a special event. I literally reached out to MJ Hagar's campaign last week and said, what can I do to help? I need to do something to help. I need to help everybody in Texas that I can. I need people to show up, because that's one thing I got to tell you, as a Tejana, growing up in the Valle del Rio Grande, I never imagined that we would ever get to the point where Texas is truly a battleground state. And now that we are a battleground state, you better know that I am going to show up and keep showing up to remind all of you how much you matter and how we have the chance to make change for the future right in the palm of our hands. We got to vote for people that represent our interests. Tenemos que asegurar que votamos para los candidatos en las elecciones donde nos pueden representar a nuestras voces. No solamente nuestras voces, pero las voces de la familia, de nuestros queridos que no pueden votar. We have to represent, we have to show up, we have to support. And I got to tell you, I love doing these kind of events because it gives me a good chance to connect with everybody and tell you, lo podemos hacer. Sí se puede. En realidad, estoy hablando muy honestamente, sí se puede. Yes, we can. We have been overlooked for so long. And in the past couple of years, it has given me such hope and such happiness to see our power rise. We can change things. And events like this is how we can change it. We're here. I have a long list of people that are like amazing people that are here. You're going to hear from all of them. We're going to tell you why we're voting, what's at stake. We're going to hear so many kinds of feelings that so many of you might connect with different people for. And you know what? That's exactly what we're supposed to do. Find the people we connect with and support them at all hands. So with having said that, I want to get this show started because I want to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak to you all. Gracias por acompañarme en este evento. Es un placer. Vamos a comenzar el programa. Our first speaker is, Our first speaker is a cross-cultural marketer and Hispanic outreach strategist. She works as director of account services at a cross-cultural advertising agency in Austin, but fulfills her passion for engaging Latino voters by serving as Hispanic Caucus Committee woman for the Texas Democratic Party and as VP of the board of Jolt Action, the largest Latino progressive organization in Texas. focused on building the political power and influence of young Latinos. And that work is very necessary. Please help me welcome Cecile Lamer.
Gracias, Cristela. Muchas gracias. Buenas noches a todos los que nos acompañan. Thank you so much for inviting me to join and be part of this amazing lineup. Oh my gosh, the people are going to speak after me. Oh my gosh, it's an honor to be part of this group. I'm very excited to be sharing this space with all these incredible women and men on this Zoom tonight. I could not be more energized about this election, and I know I'm not alone. You have all seen the record-breaking numbers of early voters in Texas, and guess what? We're actually leading the rest of the country in terms of early voting. Yes, Texas, the non-voting state, we're leading in early voting. But we cannot assume that these are all Democrats. You know, the other side is equally fired up. You know, the other side, the loud minority of Trump voters. Well, you know, we know that the future is in our hands, in Latino hands. Actually, in Latina hands, because our influence as moms, as daughters, sisters, comadres, not just within our family, but in our community, is endless. And the other side knows this. This is their last stand. They see us, and like Cristela said, they're afraid of us. The last 4 years have been their last desperate attempt at preventing what they see coming. An America that is no longer white, but all sorts of beautiful shades of brown. My parents are Mexican. My husband's parents are Dutch. And my 4 boys like to call themselves Dutchican. My brother married a Russian woman, and his kids are Russican. My other brother married a lovely woman from France. And so, yes, their twin daughters are Frenchican. So, yes, we Latinos, Hispanics, Chicanos, Tejanos, Latinx, or Dutchicans, whatever we choose to call ourselves, we have been here all along, and our numbers are growing and our power is growing, and the right knows that, and they're afraid. We cannot let them have another 4 more years. Just imagine what the damage they can achieve in 4 more years. Every single day that goes by, they set us back. Did you know that Trump has appointed a quarter of all the current federal judges in the US today? That's 200 out of 800 judges are appointed by Trump. And guess what? 8 out of 10 of them are white. And not just that, they're young. They're the youngest he can find out of law school, the youngest judges he can find so that they can serve on the bench for a long time. They have used the past 4 years to build their last line of defense, to protect their white privilege, to ensure that they retain power. Imagine what 4 more years will do to America, to our children's future. So don't just vote. Get everyone you know to go vote. We have 13 days, 3 hours, and 47 minutes left to change the direction of our country. What are you willing to give, to do, so that come November 4th, you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, I truly did everything I could. Voting is not enough. We got to get people to the polls. And that's all I have to say about that tonight. Thank you, guys. Sí se puede, claro que sí se puede.
That's fantastic. And it's so true. It's actually, I mean, seriously, you know, a reminder to everyone, a lot of times we get so many people asking for donations, you know, donate to the campaign, and that's great too. But remember, we can also donate our time and effort. And that's something that's really necessary. You know, it's something like Satsi said, we have to make sure that when we look back, We know we did everything we could to know that we're at that place and we had something to do with it. Thank you so much, Satsi. That was really great. Thank you. And our next speaker is a civil rights leader, former U.S. Senate candidate, author, and community organizer, forging a better future for all Texans. Cristina founded and led two of Texas's largest voting and civil rights organizations, JOLT, a Texas-wide organization focused and energizing the Latino vote, and Workers' Defense Project, winning the passage of local and state laws protecting the rights of hundreds of thousands of workers. Please help me in welcoming Cristina Sinsun Ramirez.
Good to be here with you all. I'm really excited to go after Satsil. So I'll tell a really funny quick story, which is on the campaign trail, there were a few events where Satsil and I would show up and people would get us confused. And I was so excited to be confused with the Satsil because I think she's brilliant and beautiful. And so it's an honor to go after you, mujer. But I just want us to think about, I know it's a really scary and hard thing to do, but to go back to election night 2016, because I liken it to our political 9/11, because we will always remember where we were and what we felt in that moment. And I think as Latinos, we felt something particularly painful, difficult, in a fear for our community, for our family members, for those of us that have family members who are undocumented or friends who are, or even just as Latinos or folks that are brown walking around, a fear of attack, assault on our very beings and the integrity of our families. And that fear, the other side of that is the courage to make incredible change. You know, Cristela talked about the fear of our power, right? And, you know, when I launched JOLT the week after the 2016 election, I'd spent 3 days crying in bed. Did anybody else cry after the 2016 election? I spent days crying. And then I decided the best thing I know how to do is to fight back, is to organize with my community. That if we unlock the power of the Latino vote in Texas, it's not just going to change the outcome of our state, it's going to change the entire outcome for our country, and not for an election cycle, but for a generation. That is the power that we hold as Latino voters. And so for us, we can not only flip Texas, we can determine a whole new direction for our country. And also what's at stake, I think about, isn't just winning, flipping the state, but is also recognizing that our community has so much to gain, so much greater resources and power that we deserve. Because even though we make up 40% of this state's population, we are the least likely to graduate college. We are the most likely to be poor, the most likely to die on the job, and the most likely, along with our African-American brothers and sisters, to have the power of our vote and our voice suppressed. So when we think about what's at stake for us, I think that there's tremendous things we can gain with the power of our vote, that we can elect MJ to the Senate, that we can elect Joe Biden, and we can elect candidates up and down the ballot that will actually fight for us in our communities. You know, and when it comes to the issues that matter to our communities, whether we're talking about the devastating impact that COVID-19 is having on our community, and it is devastating. We all know how bad it is for our community, how many people have gotten sick and died in our community, how many people are struggling financially and being removed from their homes across this country, and especially here in Texas, even though they shouldn't be. That we need our greatest power and tool that we have to defend the honor of our communities and families is by voting. That maybe we're not a wealthy community, but in political power, we are rich, especially in untapped political power. And also on the other issues of climate change, John Cornyn doesn't even believe climate change is real up until recently, even though he had access for years to the best scientists in the world. He just figured out that climate change is real. Well, MJ knows climate change is real and that Texas can be the center of a green energy revolution. And for me, you know, I don't look for elected leaders that thing. I don't look for elected leaders that know every single issue like the back of their hand. I look for elected leaders that are willing to listen, that have core values and that will listen to community leaders to determine what is the best policy outcome. And I want to thank MJ because on the issue of immigration, my partner, the father of my 3-year-old little boy, is a dreamer. He came to this country 8 years old with his mother that was seeking a better life for him. They crossed the Rio Grande River. And for us and our family, that is not a criminal act. That was an act of love and courage to come to this country, to try and seek a better future. And so I'm grateful also on policies like immigration that MJ stands up for not continuing the policies to criminalize the undocumented, which is so critical to our community. The last thing I want to say is that I know that so many of us in our community live afraid of what politicians will do to us. But I think it's about time they lived afraid of what we will do to them with the power of our vote. And that is what we can go do now here in Texas and go vote and get out all of our family members to vote, our friends. We are the most powerful tools to create a political revolution by getting out our friends and family to vote. No one is a better messenger for our tias, tios, amigos, vecinos, quien sea, than us. So let's go get MJ elected and also flip Texas, y'all. I'm super excited for it.
Thank you, Cristina. Thank you so much for joining us. And it's true. I mean, honestly, we have to really embrace the power. That's the thing about voting, right? Is that we elect the people that will work and listen to us and actually help us get to what we want to do. That's what I think an election should be about. You vote for the people who will actually listen. And it seems like it shouldn't be such a novel idea, but it kind of is, to have people that also have a story to tell. I also agree with you when you were saying, it's not that I want somebody that knows their stance on everything. I want someone that comes with experience to actually listen to people and make an opinion and a plan based on what everybody wants, not just on what they believe. So I think it's really important. Thank you, Cristina, so much. We're going to keep this going just to make sure everybody has a chance to speak, because I'm really in love with this lineup. So having said that, our next guest, since 2009, Miguel has served the residents of Dallas in the areas of education, housing, and transportation. Miguel began his professional career as a member of President Barack Obama's victorious 2008 campaign, and soon after was selected as a Teacher for American Corps member in Dallas, Texas, where he taught 8th grade social studies in the Dallas public schools. Solis would later serve as special assistant to the superintendent of the school system, co-found the nonprofit Latino Center for Leadership Development, and run the urbancy policy think tank Coalition for a New Dallas. In 2013, Miguel was elected to the Dallas ISD Board of Trustees at the age of 27. That's impressive. During his tenure, he has also been elected by his colleagues as the board president and vice president, making him the youngest person to ever hold these roles. Please help me in welcoming from the Dallas ISD, Miguel Solis.
Thank you so much, Cristela. And I got to start off by saying it is going to be very difficult to be the first Latino to speak in this lineup after 3 dynamic Latinas sharing your experiences. To Cristina and Cecile and you, Cristela, thank you so much for everything that you have said up to this point and for everything that you're doing to work to try to ensure that we have change in this state by electing MJ Hagar. And I think it's only fitting that I actually introduce to all of you that are watching this one additional powerful Latina who has shaped my life in so many ways. And that woman's name was Emilia Diaz de Leon. Emilia was a Mexican refugee in the early 1900s who fled the Mexican Revolution after her father was assassinated. He was the mayor of a little town in Jalisco, Ojuelos, Jalisco, Mexico. She came to America with literally nothing but her sisters and her mother, and forged a life in America, and ultimately was successful in forging that life and would meet the love of her life, Luis, who himself came from Mexico, León, Guanajuato, to be more specific. They would have 4 kids And one of those kids would end up being my dad, Esteban. Emilia was my grandmother. And Emilia faced a lot of challenges in her life. But the one thing that made the difference in Emilia's life and in my father's life, and ultimately in my life, was the fact that America embraced Emilia. America embraced my father, and America has embraced me. And one generation removed from my grandmother, Cristela, as you just mentioned, I've been able to accomplish a lot of these things and be able to go on and get my degrees and go to study at schools like Harvard University. None of that would be possible had it not have been for a country embracing these Latinos. Unfortunately, in 2016, America radically changed. And one of the things that I want to make crystal clear to the people watching tonight is that I serve on the school board of the second largest school system in the state of Texas and one of the largest in the United States of America. The thing that makes Dallas unique and this public school system unique is that we've actually got the most concentration of Latino students in any district in any of the United States. And the problem that we saw in 2016 is almost immediately when President Trump kicked off his campaign, he started to bash our communities. Specifically, he started to bash my community, the Mexican community. And I remembered back to the experiences that my family experienced in this country and just thought, what would have happened had Emilia met an America like that? In 2016, when President Trump was elected, people started to follow him, including people that we would think would stand for the principles of America that have always made it great, like a John Cornyn. He should have been a senator who was willing to push back against Donald Trump, and instead he didn't. And what ended up happening is we saw state officials in the state of Texas start to pass laws that would harm our community and harm our kids in DISD. There's a bill that was called SB4 that ultimately became law that really took a lot of inspiration from Donald Trump's rhetoric. And that bill is the Show Me Your Papers law in Texas. And when that bill passed the next day, 20,000 students didn't show up to school in DISD. All of those students were undocumented students. And from that point moving forward, our kids have remained in fear. And at the end of Donald Trump's presidency, and this will be the end, we are seeing him continue to double down on not caring about Latinos. In Dallas ISD, 45% of our students speak English as a second language, and 72% of all of our students are Latino. Most of them are impoverished. And we ended up having to provide tens of thousands of units of technology and millions of meals to try to keep our Latino students fed and connected so that they could get some type of education, simply because our president failed as a leader and our senator did not stand up for our community. Instead, what John Cornyn did was tweet a picture of a Corona bottle and make a joke to show us what he really thought about the nature of the pandemic at a time where he could have saved people, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of lives. So the last thing that I want to say is, I've seen what this administration and what John Cornyn's lack of leadership can do from a school district standpoint. I've seen what it can do from a personal standpoint. My daughter had to have a heart transplant at the age of 3 months old. And she will now have a pre-existing condition for the rest of her life. My wife and I currently have Obamacare. And if we don't send someone like MJ Hager back first to the Senate and kick Cornyn out, and we don't see Donald Trump in this presidency, this is personal for me as well, because my healthcare and my wife's healthcare is up, and my daughter potentially will not have healthcare moving forward. So the time to act is now. Latinos matter. We matter. We've always mattered. But the only way that these people are going to take us seriously is if we vote and show them that our votes matter as well. Let's do this. We absolutely can. And I'm so honored to be able to join so many great people who are also in this work together.
Thank you so much, Miguel. It's actually, thank you for sharing that. I think that one of the things that we always, that that I personally find important is just to make sure that we actually have stories that can tell you what is important and what we're doing with why we do the getting out the vote, why we work in this world, why we try to get people to get involved, because sometimes we remind people this isn't about politics, it's about life. And that's what we're trying to fight for, a better chance of life so that we all have access to equal things so that we can actually have a chance at life, which is so simple, yet for some people so hard to understand. So thank you so much for sharing that, Miguel. It really means a lot. Thank you so much. And our next guest, look, I'm going to be honest, I'm a little biased just because this Texas state representative represents the heart of Hidalgo County in deep South Texas. Hidalgo County is where I was born and raised. Representative Canales is currently serving as the chairman of the powerful House Transportation Committee, the first Latino to hold that position. Chairman Canales has a long history for education, current and retired teacher, healthcare, and greater government transparency. Also lives in the city of Edinburgh, which is where my family currently lives as well. So like I said, I'm a little biased because this is a little personal. Please help me in welcoming Terry Canales.
Thank you so much for having me. Stella, one of the funniest people I know, but this is not a laughing matter, the reason that we're here. I want to thank everybody who's participating today, but more so everybody who's working this stuff. Yeah, I was listening to you, and I was on the floor when the legislature passed SB 4, and I had not the design but I had the distinction of being the last speaker to speak against S4, which is the Show Me Your Papers. And what was really strange is that I looked up in the top left-hand corner of the chamber was a photograph of my great uncle, J.T. Canales, who was the first Hispanic to ever serve alone in the legislature. He was the only Hispanic. And at that time, when he was there, he fought the murderous actions of the Texas Rangers and dismantled them. And there I was 100 years later on the floor fighting against the bigotry and the racism that he fought. But I was armed and I had friends. We now have the Mexican-American Legislative Caucus and how far we've come in 100 years. The reality is that we are on the cusp of one of the most important elections of our lifetime. And I'm so excited to support MJ Hagar because she stands not only with Latinos, but she stands for the principle that we're all entitled to the American dream, not just some, not just a few. I've watched guys like John Cornyn, Ted Cruz come and use the Valley and I say use because that's what they've done. They used it. They come and use it as their theater, and they get on gunboats and they take photo ops. And they paint this place as a war zone. This isn't a war zone, it's a trade zone. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. It's nothing short of magical, but they've used it as a whipping post of red meat. And then people like MJ Hagar understand that we don't need to build a wall. We need to build better infrastructure so that the commerce between Mexico, our largest trading partner, is facilitated. We don't need to shut down borders. We need to open the borders so that we can make better trade, so that we can increase the Texas economy, so that we can create jobs. Many of the people where I'm from, including myself, have family members that are immigrants, some undocumented. These are not rapists and murderers like the president says. These are good people. These are hardworking people. I watched this before, and I watched what it did to my community too, Miguel. And the reality was, it was devastating. Earlier, I heard one of the speakers say, "Did you cry when Trump was elected?" I physically did. My wife came and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, I'm not," because I knew what was coming. I knew because I'd already had a taste of it. I know what Republican leadership looks like, and it's not leadership. And the people that we believed, even there are good Republican people, but they have fallen so far from what politics should be. You may think and how that you don't have to vote. And I'll tell you this, if you don't take an interest in politics, it will surely take an interest in you. And it has. It's affected our communities. It's affected us in such a powerful way. The reality is we need people that have a spine, that have the backbone to stand for what's right, what's good, what's decent. John Cornyn has enabled the president, and now he backpedals and says, oh, I didn't stand with him, and I stood against him on the border wall, but quietly or casually. I'm going to go with the latter, the former and the latter. He did it quietly and quickly. John Cornyn has done nothing for South Texas. I watched him come one time and sit with a roundtable leadership, telling how the tens of thousands of veterans that we had in South Texas did not have a photo, and kind of tell us he was going to do something. This will be a decade that I'll be in the legislature next. We've got tens of thousands of veterans who still don't have a freestanding hospital in the Rio Grande Valley. I've spoken with MJ Hagar. She knows what we need to get done here. She will get it done. She is a veteran. She knows how the VA has failed. The VA has failed veterans. Imagine not even having a veterans hospital in the Rio Grande Valley. She is a powerful woman. We need to elect more women. I'll tell you that the women that I've seen in the legislature work twice as hard with twice as much grit and leave their pride at the door. The Latinas and other women that I've worked with are so powerful and so important. We need to vote for Democrats up and down the ballot, and more than ever, women. Men have had their chance. We have. And the reality is we need more powerful women in places. I've worked with my friend Gina Hinojosa over the last few days to talk about how we need to empower more women in the legislature and how they deserve more spots of power, because they do so much of a better job. And I want to share this with you, that I wouldn't have believed it, but in the last couple hours, Cristela, one of the conversations I've been having is how we have one of my fellow colleagues and representatives that is possibly going to be the next Speaker of the Texas House if Democrats take the House right here from the Rio Grande Valley. To have a Latino that is a Speaker of the Texas House, talk about shattering a ceiling. This only happens if we vote. You have to vote. Su voto, su voz. Estoy tan emocionado de estar aquí con ustedes que casi me da lágrimas, porque estamos al punto de ganar, de cambiar nuestro futuro para siempre. MJ Hagar is the person to vote for. We need that change. We deserve that change. We are the change. Your vote is the voice. Please go vote. Vote like your life depends on it, because it does. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Terry. You know, it's actually, you bring up a really great point that I'd like to point out. Having grown up in, being born in San Juan, being raised in the Rio Grande Valley in San Juan, Texas, I think that's one thing that's always annoyed me about the depiction of the area is that people will come, and you're right, they make it seem like it's a war zone, when in reality, La Plaza Mall is one of the biggest grossing malls in the United States, if not number one. We actually this country depends on the economy of Mexican people that come and shop and then go back home at the end of the day. This is a side of the economy, a side of of the valley that we never talk about because it's positive. And, you know, that doesn't go with the narrative that we need to do these extreme measures like build this wall and blah, 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 because they actually don't want to report that the Rio Grande Valley can bring in about like over $4 billion to the economy every year. That's what border towns do. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that and that you touched upon it, because it's true. And also the idea that there is no VA hospital in the Rio Grande Valley for so many people. I know that so many of my friends that I grew up with went into the military, because that's also one of the options that we have to do after high school. You know, so many of my friends went into the military, and the fact that we don't have anything that can help them and thank them for their service by actually giving them a service is just insane. And I love that you pointed that out. It's very important. Thank you so much, Terry. Coming up next, Senator Alvarado is proud to serve Texas Senate District 6 in Harris County and was elected in a 2018 special election. Prior to her tenure as state senator, she served 5 terms, cinco, representing District 145 in the Texas House with a legislative focus on economic development, public health, and public education. Senator Alvarado was recently elected by her colleagues to serve as the chair of the Texas Senate Democratic Caucus. She is a native Houstonian and a longtime resident of Houston's East End. Please help me welcome Senator Carol Alvarado.
Buenas noches. Cristela, it's a pleasure to meet you. And boy, it is good to see some of my hermanos, Miguel and I go back a long way. And of course, my brother in the house, Terry Canales. Boy, Terry was singing music to my ears, all the praise and the love he was giving to women and Latinas. And I tell you what, he is spot on. You know, when I was in the house, sometimes the women, the Latinas, and we'd bring in all of our other sisters, we would just huddle on the floor for no reason. And when we huddled on the floor, the guys would all like, hey, what are they up to? But that just goes to show you that when women are leading, when women are in positions of power and they're at the table, you will see a lot more listening going on and a lot more of that terrible C word, consensus, compromise building. Got y'all there, huh? Anyway, it is good to be with y'all. I'm Carol Alvarado, as our wonderful moderator said, and I am honored to meet you. I keep up with you a little bit on Twitter. I saw your job application for the future Biden-Harris White House. I think you'd be great, so you've got my vote for that. But I grew up in Houston's East End, in the barrio, in the hood. Very proud of my roots and my upbringing. I served on the Houston City Council for 6 years, where I passed the ban on smoking in restaurants and bars and in the workplace. And that's been a lot of my focus during my time in public service. And in the House, I was able to get some grand jury reform passed because Texas, unfortunately, was just so far behind when it came to how we pick grand jurors. And I'm very honored to be in the Texas Senate. And I am real excited about what the potential is for Texas. We are the largest battleground state in the country. That's why there's so much money flowing into our state. Finally, por fin, because we've always been the cha-ching, cha-ching ATM machine. And my comadre over there, Celia Israel, she and I have been fighting to get online voter registration in Texas. We're going to get it done next session if it kills us. But with the two of us, I know we'll make it happen. But I want to give a shout out to her because what she has done with the HDCC and how they are going to transform the Texas House. We are quite a ways off from doing that in the Senate, but I think we might be able to at least end the supermajority. And with people like MJ Hager at the top of the ticket, she's a badass. She's the kind of person that we need to send to Washington. Fresh eyes, fresh perspective. And we know she's not afraid of a fight. If she took on the Taliban, she will take on Moscow Mitch and Donald Trump. And we know that she has got the tenacity to stand up when we are trying to defend the Affordable Care Act, when women's rights are on the line, when immigrant rights are on the line. We know that she will be able to defend herself and the people of Texas. So I'm excited about everything that's taken place in our great state. And I'm just really eager for November the 3rd. While we might not know the presidential results, I know that I'm going to be looking across the rotunda to a Democratic majority in the Texas House and a Democratic speaker in the Texas House. So a lot of issues to cover, but I can't stress enough what Miguel and Terry said. This election is so critical. Vote like your life depends on it, because it does. Everything is on the table. Everything is at stake. We have the Supreme Court issue going on where we could see the reversal of Roe v. Wade. And the irony here, the hypocrisy here, that somebody with the background of Donald Trump and all of his cochinadas would try to turn Roe v. Wade away. So let's get out there. We are the largest voting bloc, largest minority voting bloc for the first time in a presidential race. Let's make it count. Let's do something with it. And let's turn this around. We have got to get our country back on track, and we need strong people in the Senate like MJ Hager, and I'm proud to support her.
Thank you, Senator Alvarado. And real quick, the Texas online voter registration, Dolores Huerta and I talked about this 4 years ago. So if there's anything that Dolores and I can do to help in any way, please let us know, because we literally have been trying to find ways to make it easier for people to register to vote in Texas, because in California, we've got the online registration. We have so many options. And when we look at Texas, it's like, we're right there. We can have it. We can have it.
All of our neighbors around us, red states, have it, and they have not found any fraud, any illegal activity. In fact, I would say it's more secure, because you have to have your signature on file with DPS, and that is more secure than what we're doing right now. So hopefully we'll get there. But I know you've got a great Secretary of State. My friend Alex Padilla is doing a great job, and here in Harris County, we're making it easier for people to vote. And that's why you're seeing a record number of people going, and they're voting, and hopefully
Harris County is showing up. I mean, definitely. Thank you so much. Thank you, Senator Alvarado. Our next guest is a Democrat representing West Texas on the Texas State Board of Education, which oversees curriculum and school finance for all 5.4 million public school students. In her first 4 years, Gina led the historic effort to create the first statewide courses on Mexican American studies, as well as African American studies, which, by the way, is a very big deal for me, because growing up, I was a big school nerd, and it always disappointed me when there was parts of the history book we used to always skip over. And that is actually how I found out who Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta was. So thank you so much for doing that. Thank you so much. She continues to work for safe and healthy schools, better funding for classrooms and teachers, and inclusive science-based curriculum that lifts up every child. Please help me in welcoming, from the Board of Education, Georgina Perez.
Thank you. Every time somebody introduces me, I always hear, she did this and she did that. And I always feel like, gosh, I want to be her when I grow up. So I will tell you, when I first ran, I was an 8th grade teacher. I taught reading and language arts to 8th grade students, and the majority of them were in juvenile probation. And so that's always been a warm place in my heart. And I've always served and loved serving that community, because I find them to be quite often some of the brightest students. Unfortunately, they're dealt not the greatest hand in life, but incredibly intelligent, right? Because with a little bit of redirection, they can take all of that energy and do something fantastic with it, right? And so today I got a text message of a young man who was my student in 8th grade, holding up my sign where he was voting for me today. And I thought, oh, how fantastic, because when I last saw him, he was a little guy, right? But I will tell you, the reason I left the classroom is because Texas cut $5.4 billion in the 2010-2011 biennium, and programs like mine were lost. So that resulted in the forcing out and the pushing out of a number of students, primarily a lot of brown kids. And my district is El Paso to Laredo. It's about 900 miles of the Texas-Mexico border. So it's the fronteriza community that takes double hit when we're looking at students who are not receiving an equitable education or equitable funding. When we're looking at students in low wealth communities, rural communities, and kids who are already at risk, they became the push out group, and we've never recovered, and we've never done anything to go back into those communities to bring those kids back to education, to build up those families. And so, pues me encabroné, and I ran for office, and here I am. And Texas is home to 5.5 million students, but 54% of them are Latino. They're the largest and fastest growing demographic, but we're also the largest push out group. 1 in 5 Texas students, that's 1 million kids, are English learners, and 90% of those students are Latinos. They're Spanish speaking, and they're also the largest group that is the least likely to graduate from high school. And that has been Texas truth for more than 20 years. And still today, we're an afterthought, particularly in public schools when it comes to funding, equitable access, broadband access, etc. When I got elected, I was sworn in 2017, and the State Board of Education was trying to prove that it wasn't a joke for late night television. Health education was not and continues to not be based on medical accuracy. Texas is #1 for multiple teen births. Of those #1 in multiple teen birth, 66% of them are born to young Latinas. And this results in $1 billion of lost revenue every year. Again, where our community takes double hit. Our science books continue to advocate for creationism. Our teachers are forced to argue that the Civil War wasn't about slavery. Our history books tell us that Mexicans didn't exist until they were created via colonization, despite the fact that we have a carbon footprint in my part of Texas about 27,000 years old. And again, English learners were an afterthought. Coming onto this board, I want to say to everybody that there are only 3 Latinos on this board. There are only 5 Democrats. So I live in the super minority, but we were able to convince the 10 Republicans to do things they never thought they would do. And how did I do this? The Dolores Huerta pedagogy. Sit down, break bread, and make them get to know you like a human being. The result of this, and it was not easy, but the result of breaking bread with some people who absolutely hated my guts was the long-range plan for public education that lots of legislation has used to better fund for our classrooms, for our teachers and our students, despite our zip codes. We finally have the most aligned Spanish and English reading and language arts our state has ever seen, and we know what happens in Texas textbooks. That goes across the nation. We passed the nation's first ever Mexican-American Studies course, and every high school student has access to this course. I made sure that the Porvenir massacre of 1918 is in there, and this is where 15 men and boys were murdered, and where Representative Tomas Canales just talked about his great uncle, the first Latino elected to the House of Representatives with 19 indictments to the Texas Rangers, was the beginning of the end of Mexicano lynching on the border. And that was just months. This course was passed just months before 23 people were massacred in El Paso. Again, gun violence, gunned down by domestic terrorists, quoting Trump's anti-Mexican rhetoric. The reason that so many Latinas run and run again and run again is because we cannot be the only Adelitas to lift up the world. We cannot maintain this responsibility on our shoulders. MJ, welcome to my Adelita world. You're on board, and we're here fighting for you so you can fight for us. We need schools that are safe and healthy. We need teachers to have the ability to not have to choose between serving their students and risking their lives. We need to keep funding our schools, because everybody throws up their hands in the air when we say the words defund anything except schools, because schools have been defunded and defunded and defunded by Trump and DeVos, and nobody in the Republican majority says anything about how teachers have to keep going with less and less and less. We need to not only reduce standardized testing, but we need to eliminate the punitive consequences attached to that, because what that tells us consistently is which of our students live in low property wealth districts. And again, it's used as a push out tool. We need science-based curriculum. We need medically accurate curriculum. We need responsive and reflective curriculum to lift up every child. So what can you do? What can I do? What are we doing? We are working in Texas to flip 3 seats on the board, and we are within 4 percentage points, giving us the majority on the board. If this is what we did in 4 years, imagine what we do in 4 more when we're not the super minority. We are mobilizing the fronterizas. We are mobilizing all of the Adelitas. So contribute, make phone calls, make sure everyone you know votes, and vote in every race on the ballot. If you want to know who's working for you, look for the Democrats in your city. Some of us are pissed off, and some of us are working even harder because of how much damage we've suffered in the last 4 years. Don't stop at the top.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Oh my God. That was great. Thank you so much. I mean, honestly, I come from a family of teachers. My brothers are teachers and they teach in the Rio Grande Valley. And it's so good to hear that people are actually talking about everything that you're talking about. It's so necessary. Thank you so much. I would like to continue this because our next speaker, I'm very excited to introduce her. I love this woman. I don't know what I can say about her, but I'm going to try. Representative Veronica Escobar is a 3rd generation El Pasoan. She has dedicated herself to serving the people of El Paso and America. During her first term, Congresswoman Escobar sponsored the Homeland Security Improvement Act, the Asylum Seeker Protection Act, and the Department of Defense Climate Resiliency and Readiness Act, while co-sponsoring more than 350 additional bills. Also joining her is her cat, though I don't know what the cat has accomplished. We'll figure it out in a couple minutes. Please help me welcome Representative Veronica Escobar.
Hey, you guys. So good to be with you. Meet baby. Hey, baby. Say hello. Cristela, my sister from another mister. It's so good to see you. Great to see all of you on this Zoom. And thanks to all of you at home watching. I am so excited to be here and to talk about my friend and my leader, MJ. You know, I've talked in the past about how real excitement and real voter enthusiasm comes when you have 2 things. Number 1, when you've got a bad incumbent, and number 2, when you've got a freaking outstanding candidate. And we have both. So let me tell you a little bit first about the incumbent, about John Cornyn. You know, if you all have caught the news from late this afternoon, then you saw that the latest reporting shows that the lawyers for separated families have told the court that 545 children, their parents cannot be found. Their parents have not been found. What we have witnessed and lived through in this country, and what an entire generation of children fleeing for their lives and running into the arms of America for security and hope, what we have witnessed are atrocities unlike anything any of us ever thought that we would witness on American soil. And it is essentially government-sanctioned child abuse and torture. And through all of that, as the world was crying out, who stood silent and who was an accomplice to Donald Trump's abhorrent policies? John Cornyn. Even though those abhorrent policies were happening in his state. Never once saw him here trying to get into these facilities to talk to these children. Never once saw him demanding justice. It takes a monster. It takes a monster to be unmoved by such atrocities. That's number one. Number two, Georgina mentioned in her comments the August 3rd, 2019 shooting in El Paso, where a domestic terrorism, my friend, has been on the rise, especially in these last 4 years under Donald Trump. His own Homeland Security Agency, his own FBI, all acknowledge that. Hate crimes have been up. And on August 3rd, 2019, when a gunman drove over 10 hours to come into our safe and secure and beautiful community to slaughter Mexicans and immigrants, and he did it with an AK-47. And this is months after we tried to pass, and we did pass in the House, common sense gun violence prevention legislation. What did John Cornyn do? He turned around and shortly after that massacre took blood money from the NRA. That's who John Cornyn is. And during COVID, when we know that this pandemic impacts Black and brown communities disproportionately, when we knew we needed a specific plan for vulnerable communities, what did John Cornyn do? He didn't stand up for minority and vulnerable communities. He didn't say, Mr. President, my good buddy, our brown and Black Texans are dying at higher rates than their white neighbors. We need extra help. No, he never said that. He never stood up for us. So we know that we couldn't have a worse incumbent. We know we couldn't have a US senator who's been more neglectful and more complicit with the worst policies in modern American history. So we know that. But we've also got a badass candidate. We've got MJ Hagar. You know, I will tell you, I'm sure you all saw the debate where I was like, oh my God, MJ kicking ass left and right. I will tell you, my favorite moment of that debate was when Cornyn tried to insinuate something and then said, oh, well, yeah, she's tacitly approving of whatever it was. And MJ was like, I don't tacitly do anything, bitch. And I was like, yes, MJ! It was so fantastic. So I loved it. But one of the things that I loved was when she was asked about the abhorrent Remain in Mexico policy. Not only did she repudiate it, but she turned it back on Cornyn and said, don't hide behind the pandemic. You supported this policy long before the pandemic ever happened. We also know that, so MJ, the number one, the strength of who she is, she's unafraid to be truthful and honest, and she embraces it. And you know, one of the things I've learned as an elected official and as a public official, people aren't always going to agree with you, but people respect honesty. And even when you have conversations and people walk away saying, you know, I don't agree with you, but I really appreciate that you took the time to tell me your position. That's what people want in their public servants. And that's what we heard on the debate stage that night. And that's why it was so incredibly exciting and refreshing and inspiring. You know, the other thing about MJ is she understands and knows the southern border of the state that she's going to represent. She knows the opportunity that it represents. She knows that safety and security is not about how you militarize, but how you work strategically with communities, how you build trust in communities, how you work with your neighbors on the other side of those boundaries. And it's about seizing on really what is the new America and the new Ellis Island. The first time that MJ and I had a conversation about it. And I'm like, MJ, look, the border is important to me. I want us to talk about this, and I want to know what your view is. The minute she was done chatting with me about it, I was like, you're my girl. I'm all in, 100%. And when I'm in, baby. And then the last thing I want to say is MJ knows how to protect our families, whether it's gun violence prevention, common sense gun violence prevention legislation that 90% of Americans, even gun owners, support. Using science as a way to guide our COVID response, a pandemic that is decimating Black and Brown communities. Science, what a concept, but that she will use it to protect our families and to ensure that our values are at the forefront. But also the thing about MJ, again, is that she wants to represent all of us, not some of us, not people who agree with her. She wants to represent all of us. And that's what public service is about. And so to my friends at home watching, those of you who know this is the most important election of our lifetime and that there's no going back after November 3rd. And those of you who want to wake up on November 4th, sorry about that. Those of you who want to wake up on November 4th, totally exhausted and blissfully hungover because you're celebrating a great victory in Texas, ask about what you can do for MJ. We need phone bankers. We need money. We need you to get out and talk to every single person possible. This vote is going to be decided by those of us who have said, ya basta, and I'm ready for a future that we deserve, and I'm ready for a future worthy of the America that was built by our founders. And so if you believe in the vision that all of us have shared tonight, if you believe that we can and must do better, then pick up your checkbook or get on MJ's website, figure out how you're going to help and do nothing but help and work your ass off until the polls close on November 3rd. MJ, that's what I'm going to do. I love you. Thank you for running. Thank you for being our candidate and leader. Mwah!
Thank you so much, Veronica. I love your energy. It's such a great, you are the perfect person to speak right before the woman we are here to support and celebrate and just really appreciate and support her because she is bringing much needed change and a much needed different vision that is necessary for the state of Texas. So with no further ado, our next speaker is the MJ Hagar, who is a decorated combat veteran, working mom, and Texan taking on the fight against Senator Cornyn. No stranger to tough fights, MJ served 3 tours in Afghanistan as a combat search and rescue, wow, medevac pilot, and then successfully took on the bureaucrats in Washington to open up jobs for hundreds of thousands of women in the military. I say wow because I noticed that I just spoke about her, the person she's running against, Senator Cornyn, and she just seems so much more experienced in this mini bio that I'm reading that I don't understand. Anyway, MJ's tired of politics as usual and is fighting to bring Washington a healthy dose of Texas values. And she's energized by Texans across the state who are joining the mission. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the amazing MJ Hagar. You're amazing. You're awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That is high praise among this group. Are you kidding me? Cristela, thank you for taking the time to do this tonight. And I hate and love following Veronica Escobar because she's hard to follow. But boy, every time I start talking after her, I believe I can move mountains after I hear her. So what an amazing servant leader we have in her. And so many, I mean, Georgina, Miguel, y'all, I am so humbled to be in the same conversation as these amazing Latino leaders. And I cannot effectively represent this state and legislate without y'all with me. So thank you so much. The time I have spent immersed in Latino communities and not just on the border, but up and down the border. And we're heading back to the Rio Grande Valley this weekend. I love me some El Paso. Veronica, you know that I have many reasons for wanting to move to El Paso, not the least of which is that you would be my congresswoman. But y'all, I don't want to talk to her too long because I know we're over time, but I got to tell you, John Cornyn has done so many things bad for our country and bad for our state, things that disproportionately impact Latino communities, like attacking our healthcare and education. But, you know, this is what he thinks of us. Okay, this is what he thinks of people like us. It's not just Latinos, but it's regular people. Okay, but he recently is airing ads talking about supporting Dreamers. Number one, that tells you that he knows Texans want him to support Dreamers. Okay, so he knows what we want, and yet he's consistently voted against the Clean Dream Act. He says that he didn't like it when the president held Dreamers hostage for border wall funding, but he's recently come out in other articles saying that he privately disagrees with the president and then he votes in line with the president, and he does that so he can be effective in influencing the president. But I haven't heard a single example on when he has been effective in that. And what he said that I think not a lot of people caught, but I sure as hell did, was that he said he went to the president and said, please support a Clean Dream Act because it would give all of us political cover this year. He thinks of Dreamers as political cover. If you have been cared for by a nurse, if you have been taught by a teacher, if you have thanked a soldier in uniform for their service, you likely have met a dreamer. And these people, to me, are not political cover. And it's just disgusting that he thinks of us in those terms. He has not just taken money from the private detention centers and the gun lobby and then voted the way that they tell him to. He has actively spread race-baiting rhetoric around the changing demographics of our state as if it's something to be afraid of and not embraced. So, I could go on for another hour about negative things about Cornyn, but it doesn't matter. You know why? Because it's not enough that I'm not him. I am here telling you what I have fought for in the past, which is equal opportunity. When I fought to open jobs for women in the military, it was because women deserve the opportunities that men do. It's because we shouldn't be determining what opportunities you have by gender, by skin color, by zip code, by socioeconomic status, by religion, by belief, by party. And for too long, we have just been sending people to DC who are career politicians many times, and including John Cornyn, who haven't faced the challenges that we have, y'all. And then we put them there and we say, legislate solutions to the challenges of regular everyday people. No wonder they don't do it. It's I almost said it's not their fault. Although I think that if they were a little bit self-aware, they would know that they should just get the hell out of the way. One of the other things John Cornyn said in the debate was, we've done all we can. And I interrupted him against debate rules and said, then get the hell out of the way. If you've done all you can, you're done then, Y'all, we need people with the right kind of experience in DC. I have been there. I have built broad coalitions, bipartisan coalitions as a private citizen taking time off work. I was successful at it. I have worked minimum wage jobs. I lost a parent to a workplace accident. I lost my job in the military because I didn't have the right to organize. And the way that I had to open jobs for women in the military made me lose my dream job. I have experienced the things that our country and our state are facing, and not all the things, because I don't know how it feels to be a teacher in a classroom. I don't know how it feels to be, in a colonia on the border. But when I have areas that I don't have direct experience in, I am a collaborative servant leader. And I set role models for myself like Veronica Escobar, and I hold myself to a high standard that I damn well do what it takes to deserve your vote, to earn and always deserve your faith in me, to do everything I can to get the soul of our country back on track. I believe there is nowhere more clear that we are not in line with what has made us a global superpower and the leaders of the free world than in the broken immigration system that we have to get to work on. But the good news is, if we have servant leaders in place that are only focused on our constituents, the work's not that hard. The work's being done by Congresswoman Escobar and others. And I will be hard pressed to find something that she's working on that I won't support. because we spent hours talking about that before she granted me her endorsement. And I could talk about that for an hour, but listen, thank y'all so much. I know everyone has a lot going on. Thank you for not taking your eye off the ball. Thank you for the record turnout. Keep it up. Keep up the momentum. I'll tell you one last thing. There's one person who really thinks we can win this race. And short of an endorsement of me, that's John Cornyn. He really thinks we can win because he is scared shitless. And we're loving it because there is nothing, well, there may be like corporate PAC money is probably worse, but one of the worst things for our democracy is a safe incumbent who thinks he's not answerable to us. He does not feel that way anymore, y'all. He knows he's losing this election. And if we can maintain this momentum, if y'all can keep turning out the vote, if y'all can keep bringing 5 people with you to the polls, if y'all can keep knocking down his misinformation and spreading the information that you know to be truth, we will take back our country and we will have a lot to celebrate on November 4th. Thank you, my dear friends. Thank you, my servant leaders, my powerful Latino leaders, for being with me on this battle, being with me throughout this election, and most importantly, not abandoning me after we win and being with me as we craft solutions to these challenges. Thank you all so much.
Woohoo!
Thank y'all so much.
And I want you to represent me.
It would be my great honor.
MJ, thank you so much. You know, it's so interesting how when you see a candidate that actually has a genuine interest and passion for it, it just makes you stand out so much that after you see candidates and you see elected officials that have gotten used to doing the same thing, you actually notice a difference when someone comes in genuinely concerned, caring, and trying to make Texas better. Thank you so much. That was amazing. And I love it. Thank you. And coming up next, look, we've been talking a lot about donating money, donating time, effort. We're still 2 weeks away from the election. November 3rd is election day, but that is the end of the election. We can show up to to get everything done. We can get everything, the work ready. We need people to phone bank in English and Spanish, text bank in English and Spanish, whatever you got, whatever you can tell me to do, whatever time you can spare, we'll take it. So coming up next, I want to introduce Jonah Riojas. He's a Latino progressive activist and organizer from McAllen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley, El Valle del Rio Grande. He engages in the community by providing informative political forums, hosting community events that aid organizations like the Immigrant Head Start Program or the Hidalgo County Mental Health Coalition, and uses his work as a catalyst for students of all ages to engage in real-world issues. Jonah currently works for the MJ for Texas campaign as the political organizer in the Rio Grande Valley, my home. Again, help me welcome Jonah Riojas with a call to action.
Hey y'all, my name is Jonah Riojas, and thank you, Cristela, for that awesome introduction. Like she said, I am a political organizer for that campaign. Today, we highlighted the reverence and the power of the Latino community and how it can transform the political landscape for a better tomorrow. We have the opportune moment this election cycle to make that difference in spite of a pandemic and in spite of tackling multiple crises at once. This election cycle, we can elect a champion by, for, and from Texans who act as a catalyst for all people. But to do this, we need to rise to the call of duty through our fast-growing grassroots movement. Like MJ has said, you are the cavalry, and it is you, the people, that will lead us to victory. We have English and Spanish phone banks, text banks, and so many more opportunities happening every day. So please join us at www.mjfortexas.com/volunteer to join us arm in arm in this fight for a better tomorrow. Thank you.